She grabbed the bracelet right off my wrist, the thin gold one my grandmother pressed into my palm the morning she died, the one I never take off, not even to shower, and she dropped it into her wine glass like it was nothing, like I was nothing. "It'll tarnish either way," my sister-in-law said, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "Just like everything else she touches." Everyone laughed. My brother laughed. And I sat there at that long dining table in the Hartfield house, this restored Victorian in Rosedale that her family had owned since the 70s, and I smiled the way I'd been smiling my whole life around these people. Tight, careful, small. That was the night of my brother's engagement party. 3 years ago, almost to the day, and I think about it every time someone asks me why I waited so long to say anything. The truth is I wasn't waiting, I was working. My name doesn't matter much to this story. What matters is what I built and what they didn't know. I grew up in Oshawa. My brother, I'll call him my brother because that's what he is, the only one I've ever had, grew up there too, but you'd never know it now. Somewhere between his MBA at Western and his engagement to Vanessa Hartfield, he became someone who orders wine by the label and apologizes for our mother's accent at dinner parties. I don't say that with bitterness, not anymore. I say it because it's the kind of detail that matters when you're trying to understand what happened in that dining room and what happened after. Our mother immigrated from the Philippines in the early 90s. She worked nights at a food processing plant in Pickering for 11 years, so my brother and I could go to decent schools. She didn't complain. She didn't ask for much. She gave me that bracelet when she inherited it from her own mother, 3 weeks before she passed from a stroke that none of us saw coming. She said, "You are the one who will remember where we came from. Don't let anyone make you forget." I've never forgotten. My brother met Vanessa at a conference in Montreal. She was smart, I'll give her that. Sharp in the way that private school and family money can sharpen a person, all edges, very little warmth. Her parents were old Toronto money. Her father had been a partner at a Bay Street firm for 30 years. Her mother chaired half the boards in the cities and seemed to view my existence as a minor inconvenience, like a parking ticket that hadn't been fully dealt with. When the engagement party invitation arrived, a heavy cream card with engraved lettering, "Very Hartfield," I almost didn't go. My partner thought I should. "It's your brother's," she said. "You'll regret it if you don't." So I put on the black dress I'd bought for a work dinner the previous fall. I clasped my grandmother's bracelet, and I drove downtown to Rosedale. The house was exactly what you'd expect. High ceilings, fresh flowers in every room, a caterer moving quietly through the guests with trays of canapés and small glasses of something sparkling, the kind of party where the furniture itself seems to be judging you. Vanessa's mother, I had met her twice before, and both times she'd managed to forget my name, greeted me near the entrance with that particular smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "So glad you could make it," she said, in the tone of someone who is not particularly glad. I found my brother in the sitting room. He hugged me a little too briefly, the way he does when he's nervous about what I might say in front of people. I hadn't done anything to deserve that wariness, but I understood it. I always understood it. That was my mistake for a long time, understanding too much and asking for too little. Dinner was seated. I was placed between a cousin of Vanessa's, who worked in commercial real estate, and a university friend of my brother's who had recently joined a firm called Ashwell and Partners. The Ashwell name came up 3 times in the first 20 minutes. Each time the friend said it with this particular weight, like he was placing a trophy on the table and waiting to see if I'd be impressed. I wasn't. But I listened. I'm good at listening. The bracelet incident happened around the second course. Vanessa's sister, younger by 2 years, with the kind of confidence that comes from never having been told no, leaned across the table and asked me what I did for work. It was the kind of question that isn't really a question, it's a measuring stick. She wanted to know where I ranked. "I run a company," I said. She tilted her head. "What kind of company?" "Commercial real estate mostly. Some development." She exchanged a glance with her mother. "Not subtle." "Oh," she said. "Like property management, rentals?" "No," I said. "Development. We build." The cousin on my left snorted quietly into his glass. The Ashwell friend said something about how the market had been rough lately, the tone of a man explaining gravity to someone who has never heard of physics. Vanessa's mother asked, from her end of the table, which firm I was with. "It's my firm," I said. "I started it." There was a pause. The kind of pause that, in a different room, might have led somewhere interesting. But this room had already decided what I was, so the pause just dissolved into polite skepticism and the conversation moved on to something else. That's when Vanessa's sister reached over. I still don't know exactly what possessed her to do it, and touched the bracelet on my wrist. This is sweet, she said. Is it vintage? It belonged to my grandmother, cute. She lifted my wrist slightly, turning it. These little sentimental pieces are so charming. Very. She searched for the word nostalgic. Then she unclasped it. I don't know if she meant to keep doing what she did next, or if it was impulse, or if she was the kind of person who tests how far she can go and only stops when someone stops her. She dropped it into her wine glass. Merlot. $200 bottle, probably, because everything in that house was a $200 bottle of something. It'll tarnish either way, she said, just like everything else she touches. My brother looked at the table, not at me, at the table. I reached into the glass with 2 fingers and lifted the bracelet out. I set it on the white tablecloth. I blotted it with my napkin. I clasped it back onto my wrist without saying a word, and I sat there for the rest of dinner with the quiet, steady feeling of someone who has decided something. I left before dessert. I drove home along the 401 in the dark, past the exits I'd taken 1,000 times, and I didn't cry. I'm not sure why people expect women to cry at moments like that. Sometimes the feeling is too large for tears. Sometimes it sits in your chest like a stone that's been there for years and has only just been named. I called my partner when I got home. I told her what happened. She was furious in the warm, immediate way that she is furious about things that matter to her. She said I should call my brother. I said I would, eventually. But that night, I needed to think. Here is what I thought about. The corner office I'd moved into 6 months earlier, on the 14th floor of a building on King Street West. The portfolio my company, Aldercroft Development, had assembled over 8 years of quiet, careful work. 43 completed projects across the GTA, 3 currently under construction, a joint venture with a pension fund that had closed in the spring for north of $200 million. And here is what else I thought about. The Ashwell and Partners building in Yorkville that my brother's friend had mentioned with such reverence, the one they'd just moved into, the one Ashwell had leased from us. I had not said any of this at dinner, because no one had asked, and because I had learned long ago that the people who dismiss you quietly are far more useful to you than the people who dismiss you loudly. Loud people are just telling you who they are. Quiet dismissal, the kind that happens at dinner tables in Rosedale, tells you who they think you are, and that gap between who they think you are and who you actually are is where the leverage lives. I didn't go looking for what happened next. That's the part I want to be clear about, because I think people expect revenge stories to have a plan, a scheme, a cold moment in a dark room where the protagonist decides to dismantle everyone who wronged her. That's not what this was. What happened was, my brother called me 2 weeks later. He wanted to have coffee, he said. Just the 2 of us. He chose a place on Queen East near where we grew up, which I thought was either significant or accidental. With my brother, it's often hard to tell. He sat across from me with his flat white and his guilt, and he said, I should have said something at dinner. You should have, I agreed. Vanessa's sister is, she can be a lot. She dropped our grandmother's bracelet into a glass of wine. He looked at his coffee. I know. In front of our family friends. I know. The silence between us was the kind that has history in it. I thought about the plant in Pickering. I thought about our mother's hands. I thought about all the years he had moved away from where we came from, and all the years I had stayed close to it, carried it, built something out of it. I need you to understand something, I said. I'm not angry at you. I'm tired of being invisible in rooms where I have every right to be seen. He nodded. He didn't fully understand then. He would later. The situation with Ashwell and Partners came to my attention through my property manager, who flagged it as a routine lease matter. Ashwell occupied 2 full floors in a building we developed in Yorkville 4 years ago and sold to a REIT, but we still managed the property under a long-term services agreement. When Ashwell started falling behind on their rent in the 3rd quarter, the REIT came to us first, because that's how the agreement worked. It wasn't about revenge. I want to say that clearly. It was business. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a particular kind of clarity that came over me when I saw the name on the file. My property manager asked how I wanted to handle it. I told her to follow the standard process. Notice of default, remediation period, the full sequence as outlined in the lease. I did not expedite anything. I did not make any calls I wouldn't have made for any other tenant. But I also didn't pull any strings to make things easier. That, I suppose, is where my personal feelings entered the picture. What I didn't know, what I only found out later, through my brother, was that Ashwell and Partners had recently brought on a new equity partner, Vanessa's father. He had retired from his Bay Street firm and invested a significant portion of his retirement capital into Ashwell as a minority stake. It was meant to be a comfortable second act, a legacy move. When the lease default proceedings began, it triggered a review clause in the partnership agreement. The details are tedious and I'm not a lawyer, but the short version is: the lease trouble created enough instability that Ashwell's other partners began reassessing the deal structure, which in turn created problems for Vanessa's father's stake. Problems that cost him, by the time everything settled, somewhere in the range of $400,000. I found this out at Christmas. My brother and Vanessa had come to my place for the holiday. This was new. Previous years, the gathering had always been at the Hartfield house in Rosedale. But my brother had insisted, apparently, on spending at least part of the holiday with me. I'd made my mother's adobo and bought a tree that was slightly too large for the living room, and my partner had set up the table with the good dishes, and it felt, for a few hours, like something close to normal. Vanessa's sister did not come, but Vanessa's mother arrived mid-afternoon, under the guise of dropping something off, and stayed for dinner. She was different that evening, quieter. The practiced warmth she usually deployed like a tool was absent, replaced by something that looked, if I'm being honest, a little like confusion, like she was recalibrating. After dinner, when my brother and Vanessa were in the kitchen doing dishes, Vanessa's mother sat across from me in the living room and said, "I've been doing some reading about Aldercroft." Oh, I kept my voice even. "You developed the Meridian Project. On King West, we did. And the Lakeshore Mixed Use. The one that won the award." She said this not as a compliment exactly, but as something she was processing, a fact she hadn't had before and was now inserting into a framework she'd already built, watching the whole thing quietly tilt. "Yes," I said. She looked at me for a moment, just looked, and then she said, "Your grandmother's bracelet. Is it all right from the wine?" I held up my wrist. The bracelet caught the light from the Christmas tree. "It's fine," I said. "Gold doesn't tarnish." She nodded slowly. I don't know what she thought she was apologizing for, or whether she thought she was apologizing at all, but the air between us had changed. That much was real. My brother found out about Vanessa's father in Ashwell in January through Vanessa. He called me on a Wednesday evening and I could hear in his voice that he was trying to figure out how to ask the question he wanted to ask. "Did you know," he said finally, "that Aldercroft manages the building Ashwell is in?" "I became aware of it," I said, "after the dinner party." Silence. "Did you?" He stopped. "Was any of it because of what happened?" I thought about this honestly, the way I try to think about things honestly. "I didn't do anything I wouldn't have done for any other tenant in default," I said. "But I also didn't do anything I might have done for a tenant I wanted to protect." I let the process a long moment. Vanessa's dad lost a lot of money. "I know, he's not a bad person. He wasn't even there when she did that thing with the bracelet." "I know," I said again. "And I'm sorry it affected him. That part wasn't something I planned or intended." Another silence. Then my brother said something I didn't expect. He said, "I'm sorry I looked at the table." I closed my eyes. "I know you are. I should have said something. Right then. In front of everyone." "Yes," I said. "You should have." I didn't know how to be your brother and their family at the same time. And here is the thing about my brother, the thing that makes him different from the people who dismissed me that night. The thing that makes him worth staying for. He was asking. He was actually asking. Not performing, not managing, not trying to get me to say it was fine when it wasn't. He was just sitting in it. "You're going to have to figure out how to do both," I said, "or eventually you'll lose one." He said he understood. I think he meant it. Vanessa's sister never apologized. I don't expect she will. Some people go through their whole lives touching other people's things and walking away without looking back, and they're fine, and nothing particularly bad happens to them, and that's just the shape of it. I'm not a person who needs her contrition to feel settled. What I needed was simpler than that. I needed to stop being invisible in rooms I had every right to be in. And somewhere between that dinner table in Rosedale and that Christmas evening in my own living room, with my mother's recipe on the stove and my grandmother's bracelet on my wrist and Vanessa's mother trying, a little late but trying, to see me, I stopped being invisible, not because I announced myself, not because I made a scene or engineered a dramatic reveal, but because I had built something real, and real things have a way of becoming visible whether you want them to or not. The Lakeshore project is almost complete now. 64 residential units, ground floor commercial, a community garden that was the idea of the architect's assistant and turned out to be the best thing about the whole development. We broke ground the same month I got that engagement party invitation. I remember signing the permits and thinking, this is what I do while they're not watching. My partner and I went to the site last week, just to walk through it. She held my hand on the stairwell of the 6th floor, looking out at the lake through the unfinished window frame, and she said, "Your mom would have liked this." I didn't say anything. I just stood there with the wind coming off the water and the bracelet catching the late afternoon light. And I thought about my grandmother and my mother and all the women before me who built things quietly and were thanked in small lettering, if they were thanked at all. The thing about fine print is that it still counts. Every word of it.